I think that, if I could answer the question,
sure,
I think that Apple's PR operates very much in stealth mode. I'm a little bit of an Apple fangirl, and you know, if you read, for example, John Gruber is a very famous Mac user, and he has a blog called Daring Fireball. And when people were complaining about how, oh, AT&T 3G, you know, it doesn't work, he actually got to speak to the VP of marketing and wrote about it on his blog. So I don't think their PR department is just sitting around. You know, I think they're choosing to engage in social media in very specific contexts.
In that regard, I think it's what Apple does is indicative of like a growing, and it's not even growing. It's here. There's no such thing as scarcity anymore in the media. There's everyone. You know, every one of us is maybe not by title, but in effect, we have the potential to be the editor of the New York Times in terms of where our voice can reach. And you see a lot of different brands trying to find ways, whether it's by exclusivity and like releasing things to just a select few people. But you see a lot of brands trying to recreate that kind of scarcity and that exclusivity that used to exist when you didn't have millions of people with access to information that like we have now with the internet. And that was a form of currency that doesn't exist anymore. And Apple's methodology is one way that they kind of recreated it in a way that works for them. But today, for instance, I retweeted something that an Ad Age reporter posted on Twitter, and it had a typo in it. And he wrote to me. He's like, "Why'd you do that? I would have retweeted and put it back up in a second without the typo." And I'm like, "Well, there's also a currency in primacy when things are so popular and everybody's talking about it. Being the first person to say something or being one of the few, there are a few different ways that you can kind of recreate that scarcity and that value that used to come with it." And I think Apple's, their tactic is just one of the few ways that brands are trying to do that.
Did a reporter really say that?
Yeah.
Was it Ken?
No, it wasn't Ken.
Read his book.
Still don't know what it's about.
He's my homie from Louisiana. So. I think, though, that Keith, you brought up a good point that I'd like to explore a little bit further, and that's the difference between kind of using social media for different purposes. I think when you're a small brand, and I know I work with a lot of small brands, Walt Mossberg does not cover, ever, but it's about telling the story and using social media as a way to get the story out there. I think for a lot of big brands, and especially a lot of the big brand social media case studies that you see at these events all the time, it's like it's about protecting a corporate reputation and using social media to zoom in when there's a crisis and get it under control. And the one that comes to mind would be like Johnson & Johnson, Motrin Moms, stuff like that. I wonder, I'd like to get a little bit more into your personal experience. How do you feel like with the brands you're working with that you're using social media? Is it for reputation management or is it for getting the story out there?
It's the size of the brand. J&J is one of my clients. We deal with their healthcare unit more like corporate more than specific brands. So McCann wasn't part of what we do, but when Motrin Moms hit, it was over the weekend. So it took them until Monday to respond when all of the negative backlash about that ad campaign hit. And in the social media world, the negative backlash that they received is, why did it take you this long to respond? With Tylenol, the recalls right now, why did it take you this long to respond? So with bigger brands, you really have to have your finger on the pulse all the time. And that's not to say you have to work 24 hours a day, all weekend, you have to be everywhere at all times, you have to monitor everything, because the number of people who talk about Johnson & Johnson on a daily basis, I could never have any other clients ever until the day I die. But it's all about knowing who those target influencers are. For each of the campaigns that you go out with, who is the crux of your audience? Who follows you? What pharma marketing influencer, who is really the most impactful person that you're talking to? And make sure you're following that person and everybody who that person follows. And so that way when a crisis does occur, you're right there. You're monitoring the right people, because you really can't be everywhere at one time. But in a large brand like J&J, you really have to have your focus on. You really have to know who's paying attention and pay attention to those people back. For a B2B startup, kind of the same thing, but on a different scale. You have the luxury of following everybody who has ever mentioned semantic web ever. So you have the opportunity to really hone in on all of those influencers and all of those people. It's kind of narrowcasting who really matters to your brand, the message that you're trying to get across, and make sure you know every move that person's making to a degree, but know what message you need to get across to those people, because all of a sudden there's going to be a crisis.
You need to be there.
And you're not there, and it happens over the weekend, and you were not there.
I think also to what you were saying, that goes to what you said at the beginning about listening, and that's, if you're not going to do anything else to try to make money or save money with social media, right, at the very least protect yourself and listen. What I've noticed from, I guess, some of the bigger brands that I work with is that they're very used to broadcasting, and they're used to having a message, and then that message, in their minds, in the ideal, stays the same, regardless of where it goes or what happens, even though that wasn't necessarily the case ever, and to them but to them it still should be the case. So what I find is a slow but effective movement toward creating content that's meant to change, and putting something in the hands of consumers and readers and just the masses that maybe was created by the brands, but that doesn't necessarily have to stay the same way. It's just here's something that we're putting our mark on that you guys should talk about, that it's somehow an extension of what we are, as opposed to this is our message, take it and tell a friend, because that's never going to happen. So that's just what I've seen with big brands. It's about getting them used to the fact that you can't, social media is not like a TV commercial. It's not like, even in PR, when you have a story in the news, you're going through a reporter who can change things and put things into different contexts, but still that's only one funnel, one filter that it's hitting. With social media, it's infinite, and the directions that content can take and the context that it's transmitted in are infinite. So it's about identifying what you want to say and making sure that what you say can be, spoken about and taken in many different directions.
Going off what David would just say, something I was thinking about there was the fact that a lot of times we deal with clients, especially ones that are maybe startups, or they're in, like, say, the highly regulated industries like healthcare or pharmaceuticals or whatever it may be, and they're you're talking to them about social media. One of the first things they come up with, the first questions they ask is, well, what if a crisis does happen? Because the fact is, when you're in social media, consumers and whoever, even other businesses, often there's an expectation that you will always be on if you're the company. You will always be willing to react to something, willing to comment on something. The difficult side of that is still a business, and you're still trying to run a business, and there still are certain restrictions you have. There still are, your business is not always constantly going. People may be off at certain times, and that can become a difficulty, in trying to balance that and trying to help them understand the fact that, you don't always have to respond to everything, but you do want to show people that you are responsive to their concerns. You are concerned about things with them as well. I think it's it's a dynamic that is constantly changing now, and I think it's one that is going to evolve more, and it is going to change. And it's a question that, we as PR professionals are going to have to answer all the time to clients. I don't, as an industry, I don't know if we're quite there just yet of helping them understand how to get over that fact, how to get over that hill of, understanding when they need to be somewhere, how they need to respond to something. I think we're still developing that ourselves as an industry, but it's a very unique dynamic, I think. It's one thing, personally, I struggle with all the time, helping clients understand is, helping them, alleviate those fears of, God, do I have to be there if somebody says this about this and it develops 5 other people tweet it out? Do I have to respond to it 20 seconds later? It's constantly weighing those things out. It's every day you have to weigh it out. Every day it's something different. That's how social media PR is so much different in some ways, but also unique, same in some ways, that we constantly every day have to weigh out different issues, just like you do in any other kind of PR. We have to weigh out everything every single